All right, boys and girls, this is Math Message 7-5. And before I tell you what we're doing in this math message, I want to pose a little question to you. On this number line, or on any number line, are there any numbers between 0 and 1? Now, of course, if we were in class, we'd be able to talk about this, and we would be able to discuss it and have some conversation. But we're not able to do that through a video. So a lot of times when I ask this question, boys and girls say, no, there are no numbers between 0 and 1. But then I want to ask you, well, let's think about this. Let's think of pizzas, okay? You can have 0 pizzas, or you can have 1 whole pizza. Is there anything between having 0 pizzas or having 1 whole pizza? Can you have anything in between? Well, yeah, of course. You can actually have a half a pizza, right? And so there's actually 1/2 between 0 and 1. We could even have the 1/4 of a pizza, right? And so 1/4 would be between 0 and 1. We could have 3/4 of a pizza, and so on and so on. There's actually an infinite number of numbers in between 0 and 1 on a number line. What are those numbers called? Well, those numbers are called fractions. And in this unit, we are really working on fractions. So today's lesson is being able to represent fractions on a number line. Now, yesterday we created fraction strips or fraction bars to use as math tools as we're working on our fractions. Today, we're going to be creating number lines that will also serve as a math tool as we're learning fractions. We'll be able to represent fractions on a number line. We'll be able to use that number line to see if there are equivalent fractions, to compare fractions to see which one's bigger, which one's smaller. So I need you to get your workbook, and you are going to turn in your workbook, let's see what page that is, to page 229. So if you need to pause the video, go ahead and do that. All right, so let's get started. On this page, we have several different number lines. We're going to divide them up together, all right? The very first number line, the top one, it says whole. So we're going to leave that number line whole. We're not going to divide it up. So you see the number 0, you see the number 1 here. We're going to leave that number line as one whole piece. Now the next number line, it wants us to create halves. Think about what halves mean. Half. Half means you're dividing something into 2 equal parts. So our eyes are usually pretty good at dividing something into 2 equal parts. So I want you to go ahead and put like a little tick mark there. Now you have divided that number line into 2 equal parts, or into halves. Now don't do this. I just want to kind of show you. So I've got 1/2 and I have 2 halves. All right? So now let's go ahead and label those fractions. If I'm sitting right down here at the beginning of my number line, I have moved 0 out of 2 spaces, or 0 halves. If I get right here on my number line, I have moved 1 out of 2 spaces, or 1/2. And if I get all the way down to the end of my number line, I have moved 3 out of 3, sorry, not 3 out of 3. Got a little distracted there. I have moved 2 out of 2 spaces, or 2 halves. All right, so now the next number line, we are going to divide into fourths. Now remember yesterday when we were dividing our fraction strips, when we were creating fourths, the first thing we did was we divided it in half. Remember, we folded it in half first. So I want you to go ahead and put your tick mark right below the 1/2 that's up above. Then once we folded it in half, we took that strip and we folded it in half again. So I want you to take each of those halves and divide it in half. Now again, just kind of take a look at this. Now you've divided it into 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts, or into fourths. So now we're going to label those equal parts. If you are sitting right here at the end, you have moved 0 out of 4 spaces, or 0/4. If you make it here, you have moved 1 out of 4 spaces. If you make it here, you have moved 2 out of 4 spaces, or 2/4. If you move here, you have moved 3 out of 4 spaces, or 3/4. And if you get clear down to the end, you have gone 4 out of 4 spaces, or 4/4. Now, I want you to kind of notice a couple of things. First of all, here you have 2 halves, here you have 4/4. What do you notice about those fractions? Hopefully you notice that the numerator and the denominators are the same. 2 halves, 4/4. When you see the numerator and denominator are the same, that equals 1 whole. When you think about it, if you ate 2 out of 2 pieces of pizza, you ate the whole thing. If you ate 4 out of 4 pieces of pizza, you ate the whole thing. Also, I want you to pay attention. You'll see here that the 1/2, I'm going to use a different color, the 1/2 and the 2/4 are equivalent fractions. All right, so now let's look at our next number line. This time we're going to divide our number line into 8ths. Now, just like with our fraction strips yesterday, first we divided it in half. Then we took that and we folded it in half again. So I want you to do that. And you should notice that it should line up perfectly with the marks that you have above. That's really important when you're creating this as a tool. All right, let me get all those marks off of there. I don't want those marks on there. Oops. There we go. All right. Having some technical difficulties here. Let me get that off there. All right, so now that we have it divided into 4ths, just like above, now we're going to take and divide each of those sections in half. So I'm going to divide this one in half, divide this one in half, divide this one in half, and divide this one in half. Now be careful. Make sure that you did this accurately. I'm going to use a pen to kind of highlight. I want you to just go through and use your finger. You need to make sure you've divided this number line into 8 equal spaces, not 8 tick marks, 8 equal spaces. So if you look, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So go ahead and double check yours and make sure you have 8 equal spaces. And you can always pause the video if you need a little bit extra time. So now let's go ahead and start labeling our number line. Again, if we're down at the very end, we've moved 0 out of 8 spaces. The next one would be 1 out of 8, or 1/8, and then 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, and I want you to kind of stop and make sure you are on the right section here. Your 4/8 should be right below your 2/4, which is right below your 1/2. All of those fractions are equivalent. Continue on, you have your 5/8, your 6/8, your 7/8, and finally your 8/8, or your 1 whole. All right, now the next one we're going to divide into thirds. Now, just like yesterday when we were doing our fraction strips, the thirds can be a little bit tricky to do, okay? It's not as easy to eyeball a third as it is to eyeball a half. So now, when you do your thirds, boys and girls, I want you to put your first tick mark right about there, and if you kind of follow it up, it's going to be somewhere between the 2/8 and the 3/8 on that number line up above. And then when you do your next tick mark, it's going to be somewhere between the 5/8 and the 6/8, if you kind of follow that up. If you kind of eyeball that a little bit, you should have it divided pretty accurately into 1, whoops, that didn't go quite as where I needed it, 1, 2, and 3 equal parts, as equal as humanly possible. And then we're going to go ahead and label it. So you're going to label your 0/3, your 1/3, your 2/3, and your 3/3. Okay, now the final number line we're dividing into 6ths, just like with our fraction strips yesterday. Remember, we made our thirds. They were a little trickier. We even used a ruler to kind of help us out. But then when we made our 6ths, we first used our thirds. Remember how we put them back to back and we first folded it into thirds? So I want you to go ahead and I want you to follow your thirds down, your 1/3 and your 2/3, and make the tick marks at the exact same spots. Then you're going to take that and divide each part in half. So I'll divide this third in half, divide this third in half, and divide this third in half. Now, if you double check yourself, you should see that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equal spaces on that number line. And now we can go ahead and start labeling that number line. So we've got our 0/6, our 1/6, our 2/6. If you double check yourself, that should line up perfectly with the 1/3. Those fractions are equivalent. And then we have our 3/6, our 4/6, our 5/6, and our 6/6, or our 1 whole. All right, so now that we have built these number lines, we can actually use this as tools. I actually have number line tools in the classroom that look like this. This is really officially done so that everything is accurate and equal, but yours is going to be pretty good if you follow those directions. Now I can go ahead and find some equivalent fractions. Go to the next page in your workbook where it says Fraction Name Collection Boxes. And I want you to use your number line and find fractions that equal 2/3 and find fractions that equal 3/4. Go ahead and pause the video and see what you find. All right, so for the first one, for 2/3, if I go ahead, I'm going to put a dot at 2/3. So I have to go to my number line that's divided into thirds, find my 2/3. I put a dot right there at the tick mark. That represents 2/3. And now if I look at my number line, I should be able to see that 4/6 is at the exact same spot on the number line as 2/3. So 4/6 would be equal to 2/3. And now for 3/4. I go back to my number line. I'm going to find my fraction strip, or my number line that's divided into fourths. I'm going to put a dot at my 3/4. And now I'm going to look to see if I have any fractions that's equal to 3/4. And if I look straight down here, my 6/8 is exactly equal. All right, if you have a piece of scrap paper or something around, or even off to the margin, I want you to see how many fractions you can find that equal 1/2. So go back to your fraction number line, put a dot at 1/2, and then I want you to go down through there and see what fractions equal 1/2. I'm going to kind of highlight down through here so you can kind of see what fractions equal 1/2. We have 1/2, we have 2/4, we have 4/8, and we have 3/6. I'm going to write those down. We had 1/2, 2/4, 4/8, and 3/6. All of those fractions are equal. We're going to talk about those fractions a little bit more in another lesson, but I want you to kind of take a look at those fractions and see what you notice. All right, boys and girls, that is it for lesson 7-5.